Let's say I'm in a conversation with someone and I feel that triggered feeling. Something comes up in me. I will go, okay, I feel that. I'll acknowledge it in myself. I hear you. I notice. And that helps my body so much. Even if I just cognitively am like, oh, information just happened. Ellen didn't do anything. Even if you did, even if you said a really jerky thing, still the way I perceive that is mine. Then I'll go and sort of unpack this. Okay, what was really happening? She said this and I felt this. How do I know? Well, I felt this feeling inside of me. And I'll sometimes ask myself the question, okay, well, when else have I felt this feeling? I'm looking for the proof that came way before this conversation to say, oh, I felt this before. This isn't new. Listen, if you can trigger something in me, that means there's something there. I always use this same example, and I know it's silly, but I say, if you were to say to me, you're a purple alien. Gosh, I can't believe you purple aliens. I'd be like, are you okay? Because, listen, I know, like I'm not a purple alien. You cannot convince me otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I love you, but no. I would be very confused because that doesn't resonate with me at all. Now, if you say, oh, Heather, you are so needy, I'd be like, oh, that resonates. Like, I'm so afraid that you would think that about me. But that's mine. Is it true that I'm needy? I don't know. Is it? I gotta check in with myself. Where is that coming from? Why does that hurt me so bad? Why did that scare me so much that you would say that about me?
Heather McKean is a best-selling author, international speaker, and founder of the Mind Change Method. She's a pioneer and leading expert in the neurology of trauma, chronic illness, and disease, and has helped empower thousands of people to take their health and happiness back into their own hands. This is the second time I've had on Heather. The first time was about a year ago with her husband Kent, where they unpacked what the Mind Change Method is and their own personal stories of healing. In this episode, which I'm very excited about, we peel back another layer with practical mindset tools that can help heal your emotional trauma which plays out in your day-to-day life. The mind and the stories that it holds have one of the most powerful impacts on our overall health and well-being. We are inevitably shaped by our own personal experiences, genetic predispositions, ancestry, and programming, yet few people realize the connection between your subconscious mind and your emotional and even physical health. We get into all that today and more, including daily tools to rewire your brain during times of stress and worry, and how your triggers and emotional reactions are reminders of what still needs to be healed. If you could do me a favor, I would love it if you're listening to this to hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts and give the Ellen Fisher Podcast a review. Or if you're watching on YouTube, to give this video a thumbs up and click the subscribe button on this channel. All your interactions help a ton to keep this channel thriving, so thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Okay, folks, we are back here to talk about the power of the mind again with none other than one of my closest friends, Heather McKean. Thank you so much for being here. And to get into this, can you just give us a brief overview to briefly unpack the power of the mind and the difference between what we're going to talk about today versus like positive affirmations?
Yes. Okay, great. So positive affirmations are amazing. But if what happens, and this is just the way that the brain works. So the way that the brain works is our belief systems and what we output, like in our behaviors, in our really just kind of autopilot way, which we're on most of the time, is this sort of autopilot way of being, comes from what we hold, the belief systems that we hold in our mind, which is really built from memories and experiences. So we can affirm things, and we do affirm things all the time. So through confirmation bias, through the part of the brain that we talked about last time and in the book, the reticular activating system, it's like we're set for constant affirmation. But what we're affirming is what we already know. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times what people are trying to do is they're trying to put like a positive affirmation, say something over and over and over and over again, in an effort to not do something or not be a certain way or not think a certain thing or not believe a certain thing. And so that's where we get into something that's a bit tricky when we're dealing with really the way that the brain works, which is you're going to output, which is the things that are mostly input. So we are affirming, and if you think like, let's take a positive affirmation that you may want, like I'm healthy and wealthy. Let's take that one, right?
Yeah.
If what happens in your mind when you speak out loud, I'm healthy and wealthy, if your mind immediately goes, yeah, but I'm not, but I'm broke, but I have this problem and this thing, even if it's that thought that comes up, words are so powerful. So speaking something is very powerful. But what your brain does with it after you speak it is actually even more powerful.
Okay, so what happens then?
So then you're actually affirming those negative beliefs, those negative thoughts. So you may speak this one thing out loud, but if the proof that you have in your mind, if your true is that you're not, that you're just sick, that you're, whatever, all the different horrible things we say about ourselves, right? Which we shouldn't, but we do. That really comes from our belief system. So a lot of times what we're trying to do, and listen, I get it. We're any tools we can use to help improve our life. I understand the appeal of it. But let's supercharge it. Let's actually make it work. So if in my mind I'm thinking, okay, no, actually, I'm broke and I'm sick and I'm these things and that's my reality, that's what I want to go in and work with. So it's still information.
Right.
If still I'm going to say this positive affirmation and in my mind I'm going to list now all the ways that that's not true. That's what I want to go after.
Okay, so how do you do that? What is the mind change method? What makes it different than positive affirmations?
Okay, great. So and I will say this is really basic information once you know it, but it is a bit counterintuitive because we have outsourced so much of our happiness, our health, our beliefs outside of us. So people will sometimes be like, can it really be that simple? It can be that simple when we know the way the brain works. And really the reason this feels like new information is neuroscience is a very young science. We didn't have the imaging technology to image the brain, to watch the way the brain worked. We didn't really understand the brain at all. So, and now with quantum science and everything, we're starting to understand our energy fields and the energy of our brain and our heart and our gut. So really it's exciting. It's so exciting, but it's kind of the information that we've just gotten so far away from. So what do you do with this? How do you know that you are sick, that you are broke, whatever other belief systems that we're going to have come up in opposition to what we would call the positive affirmation? That's where, in one sense, the gold is. Because when I know that stuff, and I go, okay, well, how do I know that I'm sick? And I'm probably going to go into, well, maybe for me, like if your audience knows me by now, they know I used to do tons of really significant diseases. And if you would have asked me in the midst of all of that, how do you know you're sick? I probably would have taken offense to it, actually.
Right.
Because I'm like, it was my identity. I wasn't just sick, having illnesses and diseases. I was those things.
Yeah,
They
so
were.
people will notice that you said, I did these illnesses.
Yes.
Can you explain that before you keep going?
Yes. What I realized, and this was through all of the different research that I've done and the different modalities that I've researched and become certified in. So this didn't come just like basic, easy information. What I realized, let's say to do depression, the languaging we usually use in our society is that you have depression.
And it's actually kind of offensive. It might be offensive for some people for you to even say that it's a choice that you're doing it.
Right. And I think that's where I would maybe do a little bit more definition.
Yeah.
Because choice makes it sound like I sat here and I picked no depression. Let me pick depression. That was
Right.
the choice I made. And I think that's where people get offended or triggered, is because then what you hear me saying is, so you're saying I chose to be depressed.
Yeah, when really just by saying the word I'm doing it or you're doing it doesn't actually mean that you're choosing it.
Exactly.
Consciously.
And remember, 95% of what we do, think, believe, the emotions that we have, the reactions that we have are subconscious. So even to be triggered by or to be offended by me saying that someone's doing something is belief systems. Even that is like, wait, why is that happening inside of me? She just put a couple words together and made me feel something inside. And I would say, honestly, Ellen, if I could say the biggest thing about mind change is empowerment, where we place our power. And if we give depression the power, or the diagnosis the power, or even an SSRI or a medication the power, this is going to make me well, then what I say is we're outsourcing power. And I believe that's the end all be all problem, is how often we've outsourced our power, our health, our beliefs, our way of being, right? If you can say something that can make me fall apart inside and like make my heart rate increase, make the anger boil up, make me want to maybe hurt you,
or lash out or which is like very relational. Like a lot of times it's like, you made me this way.
Yes.
Like you're in an argument, it's like, it's not my fault I'm yelling, you said this and now I'm yelling because you upset me, hurt my feelings, angered me, whatever.
Yeah.
Then you're outsourcing the power.
Yes.
Like they're the one who made you do it.
Right. Which means I just gave you the power to control my inner resources, and it's just, here's the truth. You don't have that power. You don't, unless I give it to you. And even then, even though I'm sort of giving you the power, you don't actually have the power to do anything to me. That is choice. If we want to talk about choice, that is choice.
Like how you react to something.
How I react to something. And Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, what it's called. Anyway, I love it so much and I talk about it so much and I don't have the name down. But he was a Holocaust survivor. And one of the biggest points I took away from that book, I mean, it's a beautiful book and it's amazing, but was he chose his experience in those concentration camps.
That's really heavy. Like that gets to like a whole nother level, because it's one thing if we were talking about like a light argument, you know, it's another to be talking about experiencing the Holocaust. Right.
And making the choice. And what he did, though, and this is what I think is so powerful, he really owned that they can't make me feel anything. They can't take away me. They can put me in here and they can reserve things from me, but you can't make me think I'm this or feel this way. And that's how he retained his autonomy, his sovereignty, his mind, and I really think his life. If you really listen to the way that he explains that, I really think that choice saved his life.
That's amazing. I need to read that book.
It's amazing. And I think that is just, and given his experience, for him to say that, it may be easier for someone to hear it from him, who had very undeniable horrors, where someone could look at me and say, which people don't know my history and my story, and I think it doesn't really matter, but I had my fair share of what we would call big T trauma growing up. But still, I think that's, for all of us, the biggest thing is power, where we take that power. If I'm giving it to a diagnosis, if I'm saying, I have depression, and then it just is like, I just got it somewhere. So I need to find a reason that I have it, a place that I got it. Oh, okay, so well then it's genetics. Maybe it's hormones. Maybe it's, some sort of chemical imbalance, which is what I was told, which is not true. Scientifically, not true to have a chemical imbalance that would lead you to having depression.
Interesting.
Now, not like they took blood and then, we found a chemical imbalance. That doesn't happen. So that doesn't work. Wow. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't happen that way.
That's a common thing you hear.
Very common thing that you hear. And I really do believe, I'm not going to vilify doctors. I think doctors are amazing people. I work with a lot of doctors, actually. And they say that they got into this to help people. They're just as frustrated as everyone else. Because if you really sit and talk to doctors who got into this because they want to help people, they love people, they care, they are just as frustrated. They feel traumatized. It's what we call tertiary trauma, where people who are trying to help people become traumatized themselves because they realize, like, what I'm doing is not helping. And you hear terrible story after terrible story after terrible story. And they're giving, try this drug and try this thing and try this therapy and try this, and it's not working, and they're hurting for people. And so they end up taking that on themselves.
That makes a lot of sense, because the medical system can help and save lives. It saves lives every day, helps so many people in many ways, but it does fall short when it comes to many things in regards to the human body's health. It's like maintaining sickness as opposed to thriving, reversing, healing.
Yes.
So now you're getting there. Keep going as to like this topic of like why I have it versus doing it.
Okay. So if you really research depression, we'll just use that one. And I've talked about it before, but a lot of stuff has to happen to be able to produce what we would call the diagnosis of depression. For you to have textbook depression, your body has to do an enormous amount of things. It takes time to do it. You don't, contrary to what some people may feel, you don't wake up with clinical depression one day.
Yeah.
The day before you were fine, and then I woke up. And we sort of think of it almost like a virus or a disease or something like that, like I contracted it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's very subconscious, but it is kind of the way it's spoken about.
Yes. And I will say, it's so good that you said that. It is subconscious. What we have to understand that we've been indoctrinated. It doesn't make sense for us to come out and say these different things.
Yeah.
Especially because we're in a culture right now that wants to normalize mental health problems, right? And not make people feel judged. Oh, I'm totally for that.
Yeah.
Judgment is never going to help anybody.
Right.
But it isn't going to heal anybody either.
Yeah.
To really just keep saying, like, this is my issue and I'm never going to get better. The mind goes, okay, well, we obviously have an investment in never getting better. Mm-hmm. And if we outsource to medications, to pills, which have been a great bridge for people. So I don't want to vilify that either.
Right.
But it's not what we want to do long term, because long term SSRIs actually make there be imbalances in our brain. Because so here's the thing with depression. What you have to do depression, and I say do because action is required to do it. Mm-hmm. You can't just be lying in bed and all of a sudden it's like some random thing just comes in and gets you. Mm-hmm. Now you got it. Mm-hmm. Now you have it, right? So if you are, let me just stop here to say, if this is triggery, the reason that it's triggery is because of guilt, shame, blame. That's why it's always going to be about that. And we live in a culture that thrives on guilt, shame, and blame.
So what do you mean by that? Explain a little more.
So what people automatically do with that, like you said before, is, so you're saying this is my fault. Mm-hmm. No, nope.
Yeah.
Not saying. We don't talk about fault.
Yeah.
Fault is a useless conversation as far as I'm concerned. It isn't fault.
Yeah.
The difference, and I go into this in the book kind of in detail, but the difference between fault and responsibility.
And the book is The Mind Change Method, if you haven't watched the first episode we did together.
Yes. So that differentiation between fault and responsibility. Responsibility is empowered. Mm-hmm. Fault is blame, and it's disempowering. It's victimization. Mm-hmm. So if people hear from me that, oh, you're saying that I'm doing depression, which means it's my fault, like I have a choice in it, then they're going to shut down automatically. And I get that. I do get that. So please hear.
Yeah.
That is not what I'm saying. But what if, for very good reason, and that's what I always sort of qualify, if anyone's doing anything, even what we would consider horrible things, because at this point in my career, I've worked with lots of different people coming from lots of different angles. So perpetrators even, who are finally at a stage where they want help, where they're coming in. Yeah. When you sit and you listen and you hear and you put the pieces together and you take the person as a whole, from the epigenetics is ancestry, trauma being passed down in our genes. That's the science of that. Yeah. You look at them from an epigenetical standpoint. You look at what the family that they came into, remember, without the word fault, information. And then we step back and you say, okay, this, and then this, and then this, and then this. It makes sense.
Right.
Now, it doesn't make it good.
Yep.
And for a lot of those people, it helps them so much to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But just understanding why doesn't then change it.
Right.
But if we can understand that the power, and often this comes from situations and beliefs and cultures when we were children, and it really boils down to we didn't get our needs met. And again, let's not do fault.
Yeah. This is not to be like, oh, it's your mom's fault or it's your dad's fault or
No.
whatever, your ancestors.
No, they were doing the best that they could.
I want to tell you about the Empowered Pregnancy and Birth course that I worked so hard on these last months, and I've never been more proud of something I've created. And Heather McKean is one of the contributors in this course. This course is filled with everything I wish I was told before I became pregnant with my first child over a decade ago to have an easier, quicker labor, and even a pleasurable birth experience. I created the course with my sister, Hannah McNeely, and we have some incredible contributors in this course, including Dr. Gemma Newman, who collaborated with us on plant-forward prenatal nourishment. She's an MD who's a senior partner at a family medical practice that has worked in many specialties, including obstetrics, gynecology, and pediatrics. We have Haley Callahan, a DONA-certified doula who collaborated with us on having an empowered birth for those choosing a hospital setting. We also have an incredible yoga instructor, Michelle Mensch, with prenatal yoga classes and birth meditation. And finally, Heather McKean on the mind change method and how to rewire your brain for a more pleasurable and gentle birth experience, which is one of the most powerful parts of the course, in my opinion. Because something like hypnobirthing, for example, can be really helpful for a lot of women. But for many women like myself, you can say all the positive mantras you want out loud and envision the birth you desire. But if your subconscious believes otherwise and tells you, that's not what birth feels like. I know what the movies showed me it feels like. I know what my mom and friends say it feels like. I know what my past birth experiences even felt like. Then it's not going to get you very far. That's why we have to rewire our brain and change not only the conscious mind, but also the subconscious mind. And Heather, someone who's helped so many women like myself achieve the birth they desire, shows you in this course how to do that. This course is centered around becoming empowered and making informed choices, optimal pregnancy nourishment, giving birth where you feel safest, getting back to birthing wisdom, and my favorite part, how to have an easy, quick, and pleasurable birth experience. It's filled with how to prepare your mind and body for conception, creating a birth plan that's right for you. We also go into nutrients of focus, healthy foods to embrace, and supporting your body through movement, how to get baby in the optimal position for birth and the secrets to avoid tearing, how to have an easier labor guaranteed, and the information that made my last 3 labors significantly more pleasurable, gentle, quick, and easy than my first 2. We include everything you need to know postpartum, breastfeeding, and more. And there's even a lesson for your partner if you have one in how they can best support mama in pregnancy, labor, birth, and postpartum. So you can get access to the course at ellenfisher.com or click the link in the show notes and description box. Just click the link to learn more about the course. I've never been more proud and excited about something I've created. Birth is life-changing, and I'm really passionate about sharing all that birth can be. Gentle, peaceful, easy, and even pleasurable.
I tell a story in the book about a girl who was having a really difficult relationship with her mom and happened to have trichotillomania, hair pulling. And she had pulled very significantly. She was to the point where she had pulled out eyebrows, eyelashes, really had a severe case of trichotillomania, and had done therapy, had done all kinds of things, and had not gotten any relief from that. So the book tells the story that when we started to do sessions and we got into all of this, then we saw that there was this sort of, I don't think they had gotten to the point where they were estranged, but man, her relationship with her mother was really strained. And as we dove deeper into that, some memories came up about how when she was a little girl, when she was, I think it was around 8 years old, she was in school, what she remembered was her mother angrily pulling her hair up into a really tight ponytail every morning. And what she felt like was her mother was angry at her and she was being rough with her head. And so she internalized that, feeling like mom's mad at me. There's something wrong with me. I've done something and I don't know what it is. And mom is upset with me and I'm not good. This is an 8-year-old.
Right.
That's what an 8-year-old does. That's what they think.
Totally.
So now she's in her, I think, gosh, I don't even remember how old she was, 30s probably at this point. And we start getting into this and we go through like what could have been happening with mom at that time. And she had all these belief systems around what was going on in mom at the time. And when we realized, like, did mom ever say that? No. Did mom ever, like, what gave you that idea? And she realized it was just a perception. And so we worked through these things. And here's the thing, too, about trauma. It isn't just in our minds. It does get stored in our body. Our autonomic nervous system then stores reactions in our body based on the way our mind is going, right?
Right.
So at the time, she had these very significant autonomic nervous reactions in her as a little girl, where she got, on her level, she remembered being like frozen, or what we would call fawn. There's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? She would just get frozen and then fawn and not be able to say anything.
What's the difference between frozen and fawn?
It's nuanced, I would say. To fawn is usually if someone's fawning, they're becoming very pliable. They're being, sometimes when someone freezes, they are still in almost like a sort of a fight reaction, but they've gone down to that thing of like, fighting isn't okay. I need to just freeze and act like I'm not alive.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes they won't hear. They're very just still. Fawn is actually going even deeper into that, where they feel so at the mercy of another person that you can do anything.
Right. Got it.
So in sexual trauma, often we'll have a fawn response.
Got it.
Where people from the outside will be like, you should have fought. You should have
Right.
done something. The nervous system went, no, the safest option is to just do what they say. Be completely pliable. And so she had kind of gone, we recognized, into these sort of freeze or fawn responses. So she never spoke up anything. She never said anything. She never inquired. And so this is the belief.
Right.
So we got into this thing, and she said, so what's the belief? That my hair is ugly, my hair is a problem. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So think about that subconsciously, that she never connected those things. So she started to pull her hair out because, and I know this gets crazy, but this is the way our brain works, it was a way to stay connected with mom. She's having this actual dissociation from mom, this separation from mom. She feels like she just can't see eye to eye with mom. And so, but listen, we never stop wanting those relationships with our parents. So we keep using the maladaptions that we learned as children, and we keep doing that even as adults. And so it was just further separating her and her mom. We worked through, we calmed her nervous system down, we shifted some ways that her brain held those memories. And she was just like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better.
Amazing.
So then she calls her mom, which I actually don't suggest. Had she asked me, I probably would have been like, you may want to wait a minute for that. But she didn't, and she did, and it ended up beautiful. So she called her mom, and she said, you know, I just did this mind change session, and we got to the point, or a memory that I never even remembered, and you were so awful to me. You were so mean with the way you treated me and pulling my hair, and like you were so mad at me and you hated my hair. And her mom was like, what are you talking about? Like, so completely didn't know.
Crazy.
And luckily we'd done some work, so she didn't just lash out and feel invalidated. She went ahead and explained. She had found her voice a little bit, and she explained. And she said, when I was this age, you started putting my hair up in these really horribly tight ponytails, and you were so mad at me when you were doing it. And her mom thought for a second. She's like, oh my gosh. That was the age where your best friend got lice, or what we call ukus here, right?
Yeah.
And she said, and they sent these notices home that everyone needed to have their hair up really, really tight, and to try to avoid, the lice spread.
Right.
And she said, I was so panicked because you had the most beautiful hair. Long, thick, beautiful hair. And her best friend had to have her head shaved.
Wow.
And she was like, the trauma her mom felt and the child felt from having to shave her head, I wanted to make sure that never happened to you.
Yeah.
So I put your hair up as tight as I possibly could.
Right.
And she's like, I was never angry at you.
Yeah,
I was
know.
afraid.
Isn't it crazy? That is such a crazy story. I remember reading that in the book, and it reminds me so much. It brings me back to parenting and how you never know what's going to be the moment that your child remembers.
Yep.
And
how they're going to remember it.
And how they're going to remember it.
Yes.
And how it's going to be perceived. And so it just reminds me about open communication about everything could only help.
Yeah. And I have 2 teenage girls now.
Yeah.
And it is actually helping me realize more and more, one of my daughters recently so significantly edited history in her mind to support the way she was feeling then.
Yeah.
That she made this whole story about what happened. It had to do around her birthday and everything. Wow. And I was like, oh, you really believe that's the way it went down?
Yeah.
She really believes it. It is not the way that it went down.
But we do that even in our adulthood.
We do.
That's why sometimes if you get in an argument with your partner and then you later look back on it and start talking about it, you both remember it happening differently. Like, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
How are you going to know what the truth is?
We have Wikipedia brains completely. If it doesn't fit with what we're feeling right now, we edit it. It's revisionist.
Right.
We'll go in and we will revise it through pictures, through sounds, through ways that we will change our memories.
Right. So that's why like talk therapy can be helpful in certain ways, but it can only get you so far because it's not actually, I think people don't realize how malleable our brains are and how much you can truly change the way that you feel about experiences, the way that you even saw those experiences. I've done multiple mind change sessions with Heather, and then later when I go to talk to my friends about what we worked on, I can almost not even remember what the thing was. Like, I'm like, wait, what is it that happened? What did we work on? And I can't even like fully remember how I originally told the story about the thing that impacted me in my childhood or however. It's amazing how much it changes. And then when you go back and think about it, it doesn't raise your blood pressure. It doesn't start to get you anxious like it did before because you truly changed the way that you saw that experience.
Yes, and that's power.
Totally.
Now, people get, this is where we're about to step over that line and people will get, but because I do believe we've been so invalidated because we're invalidated as children. The child falls down, they hurt their knee. You don't need to cry. Don't cry. There's no reason to cry. That's how we start to become invalidated. I tell a story. Like, had I done that with my daughter, like, child, that is not what happened.
Yeah.
That is not what happened. She would have, where she would have gone with that immediately is you're not validating my beliefs, my stories, my feelings, right? And that's ultimately it. We create those stories and those things to validate our own feelings. And when someone else doesn't do that, we're like, what are you doing? That's so wrong. So I get that. And now we're just a bunch of adults walking around looking to be validated because we didn't get validation as children. So when I say something like, we have the choice, or that it's something that we're doing, or this changing the story in our mind puts the power back in us, people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. You're telling me to change my story, but this is what happened. This is my truth. This is what happened to me. Don't tell me it didn't happen to me. And I get that. The memory doesn't work that way, though. The brain doesn't hold memories exactly the way that they were input. It just doesn't.
That was one of the most mind-blowing parts about learning about the mind, about like mind change is just the power of the mind. How over time when you tell a story, you were talking about how it changes a little bit every time.
Yes, every time. Wikipedia, man.
Yeah.
And don't take my word for it. Look up Elizabeth Loftus. There are many. I cite a lot of stuff in my book about where I learned this. There's a lot of research. This isn't made up. This isn't just agenda. This is truth.
Yeah.
The way that our brain works. So then talking back about power and how we do things, if we're talking about depression even, we have this culture and we have this romance around what it means. We don't want it to be invalidated. So then I always try to talk about to people like, okay, but do you want to continue to do depression? Or even if they want to be depressed? Because a lot of stuff has to happen in your brain to do that, to continue to do that. It's actually a success. To keep being depressed, you have to do a lot of stuff continuously. You have to depress, push down neurotransmitter production of serotonin, oxytocin, the happy, feel-good chemicals. Your brain has to do that. It has to be depressing.
And I think people just say, well, that's out of my control.
Right. And I would say, you're right, it is, because you don't understand yet how much control you have, because you haven't lived in a world that tells you that. You have lived in a world that tells you the opposite, exactly the opposite. We need our government through politicians. We need our religion through churches and priests. We need our health through doctors. And we just outsource all the time.
It's very empowering, though, to hear that you do have more power than you think in all kinds of situations, not just like serious illnesses, but something as simple as going back to like the argument thing. If you realize next time you're in a disagreement with your partner where what they say something that triggers you, and you feel this heat rising within you and you want to lash out, like take a pause for a moment and realize like, wait, this is my choice. this is my choice to react this way. I'm choosing this.
Right.
I could go the other way. And it's annoying. It's frustrating because then you see it in yourself and you're like, oh, because this is something you said that I love. Your triggers and emotional reactions are reminders of what still needs to be healed.
Yes.
So anytime that you feel triggered and you feel that anxiousness, anxiety, you want to get mad, you're frustrated, it doesn't have to be with your partner, it could be anything, something you see online, something someone else says, whatever, anything. When you start to feel that anxiety coming up, like if you just pause for a minute and realize like, wait, this is my choice to react to this. No one's making me do this.
Yes. And that's actually ultimate validation. Mm-hmm. Ultimate validation is, whoa, I'm feeling things right now. Something is happening inside of my body based on something you just said.
Yeah, why is that?
Let me validate that. I'm feeling feelings.
Yeah.
I'm having things happen.
Feeling all the feelings.
Hold on a second.
Everyone needs to know.
Yes, let me just pause. And I do this now, and it's really that shift from, in the book I call it victim-victor, and I really qualify around victim because there's a lot of wording around that and everything. But in one sense, too, it's like, hey, my body, my mind, my neurotransmitters, you let me just hold on. You don't get to be up in here unless I allow it.
Right, unless I choose to allow it.
Yeah, unless I choose to allow it. So what is it that you said that has got me all messed up in my own self right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that you just said about victim versus victor is really important, I think, to preface, because you're right, it's very triggery for people with this conversation. But there's a difference between being a victim to something versus living in victimhood.
Yes. Completely. And I really think that actually does go back to Viktor Frankl and what his point was of oftentimes we can't help if we are victimized, especially as children. Being a child, if anything happened to you, you were a victim. Mm-hmm. And because we don't have that sovereignty yet to speak up for ourselves in a lot of ways, right? Yeah. Always with children. But even as adults, things can happen to us. People can hurt us, lash out. People tend to hurt people.
Yeah.
And it's what we do with it after that. Am I going to be identified as a rape victim, as a, abused person? And I've worked with a lot of women from domestic abuse, and the empowerment that they get when they step out of that identity doesn't mean it didn't happen. But it doesn't have to be fear-based anymore. It doesn't have to be, they don't give that person real estate in their mind anymore. They don't give that person, just the memory of that person, access to their heart rate, access to their gut. Right. They don't give them access anymore. No, my body, my neurotransmitters, my nervous system, you don't get to affect it unless I let you.
And I think it sounds like people listening would be like, yeah, easier said than done, but that is the truth. Like, it is a lot of work to rewire your brain, to change your mind. It takes work.
It does.
Anytime, so over the years I've learned to, use some of the tools that I've learned from you to do on my own, and I have to really focus on it. Like, it is a lot of work to shift your mind, to shift your mindset. So this is nothing to invalidate people's experiences, the victims that have the victimhood. How do you explain that? The thing that has happened to them.
Yes.
And you can be a victim, but there's a difference between living in victimhood your whole life versus being a victim to something.
We call that secondary gains when there's something that someone is getting from the story. So, and that's the thing we've got to be really careful about is, and the mind will do this, it won't hold on to something unless there's benefit. So, and someone would think, what could possibly be the benefit from holding on to the identity of being an abused woman or whatever? But oftentimes there is, and our subconscious mind does these interesting things, similar to the client with the trichotillomania, what it did, how she perceived that situation, and what she wanted was this close relationship with mom, but felt like there was this thing standing in the way that she couldn't even give words to. And so that became this thing, and the subconscious mind went ahead and filled in the gaps with the information she did have. So what could possibly be the benefit of that, we think? Let me tell you, we don't do something unless the mind finds it beneficial. We are really resourceful as humans. So oftentimes people think, if I let go of this story, if I let go of this victimized story, then I set myself up to be a victim again. That's what they think. But if I'm just mad and I'm strong and I'm fighting, then no one will ever do this to me again.
And wasn't that part of your story too?
It was part of my story. Yes, I was had a very hard edge to me. And what it did, unfortunately, was it pushed a lot of people who I loved away. You don't get to just compartmentalize like that. In my mind, I was either strong and rough and don't mess with me, or I was completely a victim. I was a complete doormat.
Yeah, and you were doing that for good reason, the strong, tough, rough, because it was like a barrier to the abuse that you experienced growing up.
Yes. And that was part of that story I told myself as a child was, this is how I managed that. And an even bigger piece of that story was I really believed that I had made a decision when I was 10 years old that the physical abuse wouldn't hurt me anymore. That, this is the power of the mind. I wouldn't feel it anymore. And from my memory,
if you were tough enough,
if I could toughen up.
Wow.
And
that's
so,
horrible.
and I don't remember feeling the abuse after that. And I told myself because the mind is that powerful. Now, did it make it okay that it was happening? Is it true that my body wasn't being attacked or couldn't really feel it? No, that's not a good thing to happen to somebody's body. But my mind blocked it because it was actually better for me to block the pain than to feel the pain. Because then what I did with it secondarily was, okay, if I don't feel pain, I'm going to take the bulk of the abuse because that'll help my brother and my mom. So I would put myself in the limelight, if you will, of my stepfather at the time to be the one that would take the majority of the abuse because I didn't feel it, is what I said.
Yeah.
And that belief system served me as a child. It really did. It served me. Problem with belief systems, though, is you don't get to just shut them off because you become an adult. So as an adult, I was very unfeeling.
Yeah.
I had a very hard time connecting. And then I had kids. And if you don't have access to emotions when you have kids or getting married, I didn't have the access to those emotions because the brain did something with that. If I could feel, I could get hurt.
Right.
And when I thought I could get hurt, it meant get hurt, physically hurt, like destroyed.
Right.
So my mind just went, okay, well, we don't feel. Easy.
Yep. Okay, so what about for other types of ailments that aren't as clear to understand? Like this example you just gave, it's a very clear, it makes complete sense, right? Like how you got there once it's explained. Yes. But what about other types of ailments that seem very hard to explain or understand? What could be the root cause? Because really, when you do mind change and brain rewiring, you want to get what's the root cause? What's causing this symptom, right?
Yes.
So can we unpack a few symptoms that you've helped people with that what could potentially be the root cause for some people? If let's say they're having a symptom and they can't figure out, they've tried different health things, the different lifestyle things, and nothing seems to be helping, or maybe they're told they're always going to have to live with this and it's incurable, quote unquote. And I think what's so special about this conversation is that it's a mind, body, spirit approach. It's not just, this isn't your whole body wellness really isn't just your mind. It's not just the food you eat. It's not just your lifestyle. It's everything combined works for your body.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if we're going to talk about specifically for the mind today, because obviously that's the topic of this conversation, can we get into a couple specific common ailments?
Yes.
Just unpack that. Okay, so maybe the first one would be skin issues, like eczema, rosacea, acne, different things like that.
Okay. So glad that you transitioned right at that point because I can tell you then from my history where I had just said I didn't feel it, but something was still happening to my body.
Yes.
Guess how my body did communicate to me?
Yes, explain that.
Yeah, through illness and disease. That's how. So even though I was this strong person and just didn't see myself as weak, right? The truth of the matter was I was weak because I was diseased. I had multiple diseases. I was laid up in bed. I mean, my body was speaking out what my consciousness wasn't doing, wasn't admitting that I had been hurt, that I had been abused, that a lot of really hard things had happened to me, and I was invalidating me. Now I could talk about it, oh yeah, I had abuse and I had this, but I wasn't dealing with it. It was still happening. And my body was like, this sucks, man. Like,
Yeah.
this is really hard. Can we do something about this? So that's how it spoke up, is in disease.
Yeah, your body speaks to you. It's speaking to you and giving you notifications.
It always will. It was meant to, constantly. Ideally, we are supposed to be, like you said, whole. And this was mind-blowing to me because I got into mind change having studied some mind-body connection stuff and realizing that, a missing piece for me is the neurobiology. I wanted more science. The rest of it felt a little woo-woo for me. So I was like, I need science. And that's when I started studying neurobiology. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And in my mind, everything was mind. Everything was mind. If you wanted to change anything, it was in your mind, right? And not like in your head, but from your mind. You change the memories, you change the way you hold it, it'll change the things in your body. Then as I was researching further, a little piece hit me where the heart in birth and development, right? I started doing a lot of birth work through you. Thank you. And happened to be reading something, I believe, around my research around birth. And I was like, oh my gosh, the heart beats before the brain is developed. I was like, what?
You're like, whoa, wait a second.
I'm like, if everything comes from the brain, the heart shouldn't be able to beat.
Right. It's all connected. It's not like just one thing.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
So now my practice has sort of shifted. Now we do the 3-brain approach.
Interesting.
Brain, heart brain, gut brain. Let me tell you, if any one of those things is off, you're going to have dis-ease somewhere in your life and in your body and in your mind. It's going to happen. So we take a really different approach. I was like, I need more training. I need more learning. I need this approach and that approach. So because we want to have that collective way of healing. So let's take something like, you said skin disease, skin disorders.
Yeah, conditions like eczema, acne, and rosacea.
I tell a lot of people these days that my job is to be a translator, that I'm actually just a translator. I translate what the body is trying to tell you, and it doesn't speak the same language. So it speaks really in the language of kinesthetic, like if I can feel it, if it's happening inside of my body, right? That's the way the body speaks. And we've just not been trained to listen to that. We just don't live in a culture where that's the case. Now, it hasn't always been that way. Way back at the dawn of medicine, which is Hippocrates, he says, it's my favorite quote by him, it's better to know the kind of person that has the disease than the kind of disease the person has.
That is really
father
good.
of medicine.
Yeah, I've never heard that before.
And it's in the Hippocratic Oath. When the young med students take the Hippocratic Oath, there's so much in there.
I feel like we've
quote it
lost
in the
that
book.
so much.
Like
that's not anywhere to be found in modern medicine.
No, but it was at the dawn of medicine, where they said if your body is doing something, that where it's happening, what it's doing, tells us what we need to know. And that goes to that root cause. That's where the birth of functional medicine, the rebirth, it's really a rebirth of functional medicine, where people were like, this is not working what we're doing. We need to get to the root of it. And I think that was a good step, but now they're still, well, it's the food and it's the this and it's the that, and that has an impact.
Yeah.
It does have an impact, but you got to go even deeper than that.
Yeah.
Listen to what the body is saying.
It's not just that alone. That's like the approach of like the whole body wellness approach.
Yes. Okay. So let's take it from, and how did I learn this information?
Yeah.
First of all, I did a lot of study, and let me find the earliest references of if this part of the body there's something going on with this part of the body, what does it mean? So you can look in Chinese medicine. They've had this for a long, long time. Ayurvedic, so, a Middle Eastern kind of approaches. This isn't new. It's old, and we need to get back into it.
Right.
So lots of stuff. My first people that I looked at were Louise Hay. Love Louise Hay, brilliant woman, who started to notice, and she did a lot of that groundwork, and she could say, it was a bit basic. If you've got a problem in your head, it's probably this. If you've got a problem in your elbow, it's probably this. And it's kind of one wordy, and maybe little phrases and stuff like that, but it was so helpful for me in the beginning.
Wow.
To start to learn the just even what parts of the body represented as a whole, maybe an emotion. She was really good at hooking emotion into particular parts of our body.
Yeah.
So She was the first. Ina Segal, Secret Language of Your Body, was my second, where she got into it a little bit deeper. And I was like, this is brilliant. And then I was like, I need more. And so I just started anything I could find. Wow. From as far back as I could read, having to read translations and everything.
Basically like what it could be.
Yes.
Yes.
For what it, and here's the beautiful part of it. It's the same. Really? You can read something from 3,000 years ago that they said this means this.
No way.
And Louise Hay is saying the same thing here in the 1900s, or whatever. She died not that long ago, but she was doing this in the 70s. Mm-hmm. So, I'm like, it's real. Like, people aren't making this stuff up. And now at this point, when I've worked with thousands and thousands of clients, when you tell me you've got something going on, and I'm like, okay, here are some of the ways that your body could be speaking to you. Tell me what resonates. 99% of the time, people are like, what the heck?
Yeah. No, it's real. It's legit real. There have been times where I'm like, okay, what is going on here? Or maybe I'm just like mentioning something and you're like, hey, I looked this up. It could be this. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. So
Crazy.
I've been keeping notes.
Yeah.
I did it on myself first because I was queen of the, doing all the diseases and everything. So I needed to know what was my body saying. And so that's the first thing that I did was I wrote every single condition that I had been diagnosed with and any information I could find. And I started to cross-reference and go, oh my gosh, here are the themes in my life. So victimization was a big theme for me. Disempowerment was a big theme for me. Feeling like I needed to protect myself, such big themes. Like I had to do it all on my own. Mm-hmm. And my body was saying this in all these different ways. And the beautiful thing and frustrating thing about the body is if you don't listen to the first message, it ups the volume. And that's where we see a progression, especially in chronic illness. You will rarely meet someone who's just doing one chronic illness. And at this point, I can kind of tell people on where they're at on their trajectory. Like, you keep on this path, I can write down your next 3 diagnoses. Because it's just...
you've seen it so much.
I've seen it so much. And also, by you telling me what you have currently, we can say, I notice patterns. And I'm like, okay, if you don't deal with this stuff, here's going to be your next 3 ways that your body speaks up.
Don't you wish that this type of information was worked with modern medicine to be the optimal?
Okay, well, awesome. Some doctors are finally doing this. Like a lot, I've got a number of clients who are medical doctors, and this has been so helpful for them. Wow. First of all, we had to clear some of their stuff. They're like, I just need help from me at this point. And psychiatrists and, a lot of people in the field of helping people. Yeah. They are...
taking on the burden.
Yes, and it's a collective groan because there's just hardly anything is working.
Right.
So you talk to anyone who's in the mental health field, almost anyone. There's beautiful people coming out now, that are saying things. Not that there weren't beautiful people before, but we just didn't have the same information that we really needed. They will say, what we're doing is not working. It's an epidemic.
It's managing.
It's managing, and it's actually making things worse.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like the time, with people in my life who you see a symptom, and then there's a drug, and then the drug causes this ailment, and then there's another drug for that one, and that causes that one.
It's just heartbreaking. I was there too. So when you are so desperate, you're so desperate for some sort of relief, and you've got an authority figure who you have put so much hope into, and so much, please help me, please rescue me. And they say, this is going to help. You take it. It doesn't even matter the side effects that are listed. You take it.
Right.
And oftentimes people will feel better initially, and we call that the placebo effect. And the placebo effect is not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing, but it frustrates scientists. But it really talks about the power of the mind.
Yeah, the placebo effect is essentially the mind.
It is. And it's great. It works.
Yeah, it works.
It works so well. It really messes up science,
right.
And the medical field, because they can't manage that.
Okay, so let's get back into the specific ailments. Like first, let's start with skin conditions.
Okay. So, and this is kind of the angle that we take, is the outward, what is skin? Skin is a protective layer, right? So if we kind of think about it that way. So metaphorically, it really protects us from what we let in and what we keep in, what we let in, and everything like that. So now, if you want to talk about acne, we've got that's a different voice or a different message than, let's say, rosacea.
Okay.
Or another skin condition, vitiligo. I just did a post on vitiligo not that long ago. And so there's different things. So let's take, I think you mentioned rosacea. Mm-hmm. All right. So rosacea is characterized by what looks to be a blushing of the face, right? Mm-hmm. So that kind of chronic redness. And so what that means, if I'm going to translate, if I'm going to be the body's translator, what I would say, and let me preface this by saying this isn't going to resonate with everybody. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes there's many different things that the body could be saying, but it's within like usually 5 things. Mm-hmm. So one of the primary contributors to rosacea is over responsibility. Mm. And if we think about how is that metaphorically being represented? Oftentimes when you are sort of stressed out, working hard, you'll see that your face will flush, mm-hmm. right? There's also, so oftentimes what it comes from is the feeling, if we're talking about really the root, is maybe in your childhood, you felt overly responsible. Maybe your parents were sick, disabled in some way, possibly even could have been alcoholics, or maybe even just emotionally maybe not available or a little bit emotionally immature. Remember, we're not judging, it's no fault. And so you got the message as a young person that you had to be responsible. You had to kind of take care of you. And so there was effort. Oh, it's going to be effort. It's tough. Like, I'm going to have to do this. And it's showing up in your face. But you're also a little bit embarrassed about it. Like, I don't want to say anything negative about my family. No, my family's good. They're good. They did the best they could, which I believe, but we're then still invalidating the child's experience. Mm-hmm. Yes, 2 truths can be in the same space, that your parents did the best they could, and you still didn't get enough. Both truths can occupy that same space. So oftentimes that's the one of the contributors behind rosacea is someone who is really like a servaholic, that they serve in effort to get their worth, or that's how they have their worth in their family or their place in their family. So they overly serve. The body's showing it. Mm-hmm. And it's because subconsciously they want to be seen for that, but not consciously. Like consciously, like those kind of people, don't put me in don't tell me, like I'm not in the spotlight about this. Like I don't want you to bring attention to the things that I'm doing. But deep inside, they want the help. They don't want to have to be their only resource.
Yep.
So their skin flushes.
Okay.
So they want to be seen.
That's incredible. It makes sense when you explain it, when you break it down.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about like eczema or acne?
Okay. So eczema is, there's a lot around eczema, but it's the body's, eczema is an autoimmune disorder. Whenever we have an autoimmune disorder, we have this idea of not being good enough. It's a deep core belief that you have to sort of fight for your worth, fight for your value. And oftentimes we are really hard on ourselves. So someone who does eczema is probably their own worst enemy. They're probably thinking really hard things about themselves very often. And you've got to think about what the body's thinking about this. You're turning on yourself. You need to be your biggest fan. You should love you most of all. And we're not. We're not thinking loving thoughts. We're not having loving behaviors within our body. And so we've got this turning against oneself, which is an autoimmune condition. So what's supposed to protect us is now showing that we are unprotected, we're vulnerable, we're at risk, and that's what it's showing us. And it, another thing too, it wants to be seen. But it wasn't safe to be seen, usually in your family. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be the one that's high maintenance. You don't want to be the one that you were probably, I mean, again, we've got to understand people are doing the best they can, but you were probably not seen, not validated. And so your skin is trying to show, hey, we're hurting.
So what about, this is like a little random segue, but what about like a childhood eczema? Because a lot of eczema is like baby's childhood. And does this go back to at all about like the ancestral stuff that we're talking about?
It's epigenetics. But it also could be if you've got a parent that has those feelings and they're just deeply undercover, then some of that does get passed down. So
Oh,
it can be, if it's a
interesting.
baby, so almost all baby infant illnesses are going to be either epigenetics, so ancestry that's passed down, and sometimes it can skip generations too. Like that stuff isn't cut and dry. Or it could be some things that happened in the womb. So it's, and again, not to do the guilt and shame or blame. Please don't do that. It doesn't serve anybody. But stuff happens when you're pregnant. You can be in really rough situations. You can have an issue at work. You can have a fight with a family member or an estrangement or with a spouse. There could be a divorce. There could be...
And again, like taking all this into consideration with the whole body wellness, like you can consider the food, the lifestyle, but let's also consider the mind aspect and all this stuff too. This is not to say like this is the only thing.
Right. Yes, because there's a lot of different ways that we will support our real true belief systems. The thing is if we really believe we are so worthy, so wonderful, so incredible, we are purposed, we are, all of these things inherently good, we're going to eat food that nourishes us because we believe we're worthy of nourishment.
Yeah.
We won't crave things that are fake and substitutes.
That aren't supporting our body.
Right. Because that doesn't feel congruent to us. And we feel like cravings are outside of our control. And in a lot of ways, they're outside of our conscious control, but they are subconsciously based. Same with food allergies, a lot of stuff like that.
Okay.
So-
All right, so now let's get into acne.
Okay.
I know,
Acne-
I'm sure you could talk about this one specific thing for a really long time.
For a really long time,
But just for the
usually.
purpose of this conversation, to be able to potentially meet the needs of a lot of people who might be interested in specific things, we'll just kind of like lightly touch on certain things and keep moving along.
Yes, and I'm hearing the call that this is something people are really interested in. So I started a social media. Every Friday I cover a new condition and kind of go through that. But also I'm going to talk about it. I've had a podcast needing to start for about 4 years, but finally have the first couple episodes recorded.
It's going to be amazing. What's the podcast going to be called?
Mind Change Podcast.
Of course.
Super easy.
It's going to be amazing.
And then I plan on doing an episode a week on conditions where I can talk and get in a little bit more detail.
Such a good idea.
And then I would love to hear what do people want to know about.
Yep.
And that's kind of how I'm doing my social media posts right now is
Love it.
people are suggesting.
Yep.
So I'm hearing it. We'll get into it. But let's say acne. So acne is usually something at some point in someone's life, and it's interesting that it comes up a lot of times in teenage years. We just think it's hormonal or it's food or whatever.
Isn't it partly hormonal though? Or would you say no? Are you like, no, it's not?
I do think it's hormonal. But how do those hormones get produced
Okay. All right, keep going.
in excess?
It's like you keep going another layer.
You keep going another layer.
Okay, keep
we
going.
control our hormone production. I know we don't want to think that. We want to give it outside of us, but we do. We produce our neurotransmitter production. We control that with our thoughts, with the way that we set our homeostasis within ourselves and our body. Then our neurotransmitters just do what they're supposed to do. So we do have a lot of control over that. Hormonal conditions, I know people get really like, no, I can't help my hormones. Yes, actually, we can. But I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that you should have known this. You should know this. Come on, come on. Fix your hormones. I'm not saying that.
No, this is really about being like vulnerable and open to just hear like, okay, what else is going on?
I'm hoping, and my truest true is to say, I hope it empowers people. If we can shift the power back in, let me tell you, that's what changes everything.
Everything is perspective, because literally you could take what you said and say, how dare you say it's my fault? Or you could say, wow, I have control over this?
Yes.
That's such like amazing how like stark difference that is.
It's good news or bad news, depending on what you're doing in your head. And it's not me. I know you want it to be me, and I'm sorry.
It's all you have.
If you think it's me.
It's your fault.
Right? There will be people who are like, Heather just and they want to do what they do. That's fine. You're allowed. But it's actually, you get to decide whether it's good news or bad news.
Right.
It's your perception.
Okay, so get back to the
acne
thing.
Acne is that it's a lot of that self-worth and that value is being given outside of you. If people like me, if I'm likable, then I'm okay. And so it often, and think about, this is so prevalent in teenage years, right? Because we're starting to, the way our brain is developing, we're starting to want to have an identity. And yet we still utilize all the stuff that's around us to create our identity. We're like, I'm going to be, what am I going to be? I don't know. What do you think I am? Right? Who do you say I am? Well, then I'm not going to be that. But it's still sourced off of that, right? So it's that thought that I'm not good enough and I don't want, or I'm this way. If you really knew who I was, like if you could really see, you wouldn't like me. And then it comes up on our skin, on our face.
Wow. That's really interesting because I had a lot of high school acne. And it was always like, oh, well, my dad had high school acne, so I got it. It's like inherited, you know? But my sister and my mom didn't ever struggle with like acne, skin issues. My sister never had acne in high school, to my understanding. Yeah. And it's interesting the way you're describing that because I was very, you know, in elementary school. I definitely didn't have a lot of friends at all. I was just made fun of a lot. I wasn't cool at all in elementary school. So when I got to junior high and high school, it's like, okay, it's a new school, my new chance to prove my worth, to show that like I'm likable, I'm fun, you want to be my friend, right? Because it was the reason why I got made fun of a lot was like I was just too much for people. I was very like, hi, I'm Ellen, you want to be my friend? Like, yeah. I'm like, just, you know, no walls up, you know? And like, I love that. And that is like, people were like, oh wait, no, like I'm too cool for this, like I can't be your friend. That was kind of like what the response I got. So then I go to junior high and high school and I'm like, okay, be cool, just be cool, like don't be too much for people. And so that was like my story. And so I wonder how much of that is related.
Sounds like all of it, because it's our internal is trying to come out external.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Our subconscious mind does not care how we look on the outside.
Yeah.
It cares how we feel on the inside.
Yes. And everything through junior high and high school, which is like so many people. But then again, so many people have acne at that time.
Yes.
But it's like, just like, how can I, like, am I lovable? Am I likable? Will I make any friends? Like, that was like the dominant thing on my mind. Like,
and how do we, as teenagers, because that's where our brain development is right now, it's outward appearance. It's what we see.
Yeah.
We don't go very deep.
Yeah.
We don't go into the depths. And we've watched parents do this. We've watched people judge. And so we just judge.
Yes.
Oh, your skin's bad.
Yep.
You're ugly. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's just heartbreaking. It's
Totally.
it's just things on the skin, but we make these whole belief systems around it. But it's usually the inside trying to come onto the outside to tell us something of like, that is not what makes you beautiful or not beautiful.
Yeah. And this was not a story my sister went through. Like my story, that story of me and like making sure, like that was not her at all. Like she was always like very confident who she was as a person.
Leave it,
like,
right?
This is me. I'm hilarious. And if you don't like me, that's your problem.
Right?
You
so
know?
You see?
Yeah.
We want to blame it on genetics.
Yeah.
And we want to say it's just this, but you get two
Fascinating.
kids, even sometimes identical twins, will have very different manifestations physically.
Yeah.
And listen, genetics, go ahead and speak to doctors. We thought genetics was going to be the end all be all, and it's just not. They're more confused than ever.
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't make sense.
No.
But that's because our thoughts have an effect over our gene expression.
Right. But isn't it true, though, that maybe something could be the trigger? Like maybe genetics are there.
Yes.
And then it's like, what is the trigger to those genetics?
Genetics are the gun.
Yeah.
Environment is the bullets.
Yeah.
So, and they both have to be there to sometimes pull the trigger.
Yeah.
So, yes, absolutely. I'm not saying genetics doesn't have a play, but it can,
Right.
I mean, obviously it doesn't have to be that way.
Okay, so I want to move on to the next one, which would be like chronic migraines or just migraines in general.
Yes, have personal experience with this.
Oh, you do?
Yes, I did migraines. I was on prescription migraine medication starting at age 16.
Horrible.
So I was doing them real nice, like big time. But it was a familial thing. Everyone in my family did migraines. So we shared medication.
Yep.
So about migraines, now, boy howdy, this one's got a lot of stuff, I will say. And so I've got a ton of notes on this one. So I'm going to kind of be broad with it. But this goes a little bit into that whole mind-brain, heart-brain, gut-brain thing. Polyvagal theory, which I love, Dr. Porges, talks a lot about the fact that we've got this grouping of nerves that runs from our gut to our heart to our brain. And it really regulates everything. And my belief system is our gut is the place that is really where we store our most true self. So whether you call that soul, spirit, energy, whatever, it's that like spark that we have, that we are collective. We come from something, we all have this, and we'll return to something. And it's bigger, and it's more powerful, and somehow we can kind of all feel it. Some people are way more connected to it, and others have just associated from it. I feel like metaphorically that lives in the gut. It's our intuition. It's why we say gut feeling. Or if you're betrayed, it feels like a gut punch, right? Because it's this place where all of our inherent and internal wisdom is. We learn very, very early to shut that down. It's so sad. But we teach kids that they're too extra, that their emotions are too much, that they're wrong. You shouldn't have that emotion for this thing. Like, we just teach them so young that to disconnect from their intuition. You're going to let me do this for you. You're probably going to mess this up. You're just going to keep making mistakes until you're older, right? And then they get this idea that they're not, like, they don't have it figured out, and that they need to, rely on somebody else to tell them what to do. That shuts our gut down. How many gut issues do people have, right? And think about digestion and everything. So then it comes up to our heart. And if you're just in your heart without the internal thing, and you're just a ball of emotions and feelings, and in a world that's just not safe, we're not taught how to manage that correctly, you're so vulnerable. You go so high and so low, and if an adult doesn't regulate for you, that you can co-regulate with, and they are able to, handle their own selves, we're just all over the place. You quickly learn, as a big feeler, that's not safe. So we start to shut down our heart, and then we're stuck in our head. When you're stuck in your head, thinking thoughts about your thoughts, and that's how you stay safe, we get perfectionism, we get a lot of different, the what ifs, they what if everything, they try to see everything that is happening to mitigate responses, to mitigate issues, so they think, and it hurts your head. It legit hurts your head. Your head is too full of all of this stuff all the time, and your brain feels like it's swelling, and you will get migraines because you're in your head way too much. You're catastrophic thinking. You're creating bad what-if scenarios. You're trying to think the only way to stay safe is if you can think through every scenario that could happen.
That's really interesting. Anyone listening, if that's your issue, let's see how that resonates. Another one would be, what's the other one? Fibromyalgia.
Oh, fibro is a good one. I did that one as well. So fibro also is a autoimmune disorder, and it's a progressive one. Normally, it is not someone's first diagnosis. So it is one of those diagnoses on that trajectory. So usually you'll have some other chronic fatigue maybe beforehand, some other stuff. But fibro, one of the biggest things with fibro is the feeling that you're not safe, that you are at risk of being hurt, really is the thing. And so that usually goes into somehow in childhood. It could even be pre-verbal. And there's a lot of different ways you felt exposed to pain, that you were going to be in bad situations. And so you started to make belief systems around yourself and who you were and what that meant about you. And interestingly, if you take spinal fluid of a fibromyalgia patient, they actually have more receptors for pain. So it isn't that they are actually experiencing more pain. They've opened themselves up to more pain. They feel things that you wouldn't feel because you don't have as many pain receptors. But they expanded their pain receptors because they're so aware that there's pain everywhere. They expect pain. They anticipate pain. So the body listened, and it created more receptors for pain. And now they have chronic pain.
Wow. That's so fascinating.
It's so fascinating.
A lot of times something like fibromyalgia pops up later in life.
Yes.
But you're saying that it could happen from starts when you're younger.
Early, yes.
Wow.
Fibromyalgia is conceived in childhood. And over time, it develops and you start to see it in adulthood. I really think if we keep on this path, you'll start seeing it younger and younger. As with all these chronic diseases, which were never in childhood, well, we didn't even have them before. The majority of these chronic illnesses that we are so comfortable with now did not exist before.
Why is that?
Because we didn't have so much collective trauma that we weren't dealing with.
So you're talking about like the collective now.
Talking about the collective.
That's crazy.
And individual, like we just haven't, like we are taught to work and to not feel feelings. And when you've got so many, and man, don't get me started on how in America, at least, with the war, where you take all the men away and the women now are in these, roles of having to also provide for the family. And there's this whole shift that happens there. You've got all these men coming back traumatized. They're not knowing how to deal with it. It affects the whole family structure. You can trace a lot of this stuff back.
Yeah. But, there were wars since the beginning of time,
yes.
right? So is it possible that maybe people were experiencing, like, fibromyalgia, but just, like, didn't have the words for it?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Definitely these things aren't new in the sense that no one ever felt this stuff before.
Right.
It was less. We had outlets. We were way more connected. We were in family structures. So we had a lot more connection. We had a lot more safety.
Yeah, because you could look at, like, you said something about work. You could almost argue that there was more work, like the labor in regards to, like, physical labor and things like that, right? From back then. But the way that we live our lives now is so disconnected.
Right, but physical labor would have at least had you in your body. Like, it would have had you in your body, feeling your body. And there's good stuff with that. We release trauma through physical activity.
Yeah. And right now, we are in such an age where it's just like screen, sit down, do nothing, but in fact, sit and work.
The posture that we take sitting in front of a computer is a traumatized posture. It actually keeps us in a trauma posture.
Right.
So we're hunched, we're scrunched, we're this, our head is tipped down.
Yeah.
If we've got our chin down, these are trauma responses in the body.
Yeah.
So even if you maybe don't come from a ton of trauma, what you're telling your body on a day-to-day basis is that something's dangerous. Something's not okay.
Yeah, there's, like, so much beauty to this new age that we live in now of internet and access to reach each other so quickly and everything like that, but there's definitely downsides.
Right, we really just have to be aware. It's not to say things are bad.
Yeah.
Bad, good, all perception and judgment.
Yeah.
But let's be aware of the contributing factors.
Right.
That's what I love. I'm just curious. I'm like, okay, let's step back and go, what are all the, I just want information.
Right.
What's all the information that I can get?
Yeah.
So if you are doing fibromyalgia, that's information. Let's talk about the information. What could that be? Let's talk about some possible factors.
Yeah.
And then you've got the power of what you're going to do with that.
Totally. Okay, I'm going to ask one more specific, issue. And anyone who's interested in hearing more, definitely go follow your Instagram. It's just Mind Change, right?
Yeah.
Just Mind Change.
Just Mind Change.
Straight up Mind Change. Because you're going to keep posting about them. We obviously can't cover everything. There's so many things. But it really just shows you that, like, how hurt everyone's just walking around hurt. And a lot of it is, like, in your mind. And it's like heart hurt.
Yes.
And like you said, the gut hurt and the brain.
And it's real.
It's real.
In that we feel it.
It's a real
real
feelings.
thing.
All these things
are
physical.
real. We're not saying they're not real.
Yeah.
And they are tragic and they're painful and it's awful. And when you're in the midst of it, it feels like you're never going to see the light.
Yeah.
So I get that and I know that, but there is light.
Yeah. Well, that's the same thing of, like, the first reason why we ever got into this conversation together. If you don't know, you probably know by now if you have been following my life for a while, but Heather and I used to be neighbors, and I was going into my third birth. I was pregnant, and my first two births were wonderful, empowering, beautiful. I love them, amazing home births, but they were definitely extremely long, extremely painful, and I wanted to do it different this time. And I was just talking to, my neighbor Heather, just being like, oh man, I really wish that it could just feel better. Like, there's people who say that that it's not painful, and I just don't get that. Like, what I felt was, like, legit, that was pain. Like, no one's gonna convince me that if someone else felt that they would say that wasn't painful. Like, how are they doing it not painful? And she's like, well, you could do it differently, I'm like, what are you talking about? And that's how we got into it.
Yeah. You were skeptical at first.
I was so skeptical. I literally was, like, skeptic to the nines. Like, I was like, all right, I'm gonna try this thing, but good luck. And you're like, well, you don't even have to believe that it's gonna work, and it'll still work. And I was like, really? Like, I was like, what?
I don't believe that.
What is this thing?
And if you know Ellen, like, you're not like a
I'm not just gonna jump on. No. I'm like, you need to prove it to me.
Right. You're not gonna be like, well, I like you, Heather, so I think I'll just believe you.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm not like that person at all. So then when we did one Mind Change session together with your husband Kent, and a few days later went into labor and had the most euphoric birth pleasurable, didn't feel pain. It was incredible. I couldn't even believe it. Like, I was like laughing through labor, and by the end, after I gave birth, I was like, what in the heck did I just do? Like, it was the most empowering birth for me, because it was the first time that I like did something that I wanted to do. Like, I told my body what to do and when. I felt so in control. It was super empowering. Anyways, I don't know why I brought that up, other than to say, why did I bring that up?
I don't remember either. It's such a good story, though.
I know. It's okay, though. But let's get into the last one, which is insomnia. That's a really common one.
Yes. Okay. So insomnia, when we sleep, is when our subconscious mind gets the attention, right? It's in control most of the time, but it's very in the back of the mind control, right? So when we sleep is when the subconscious mind actually gets the space to file and sort and figure out whether this is a neural pathway we want to keep investing in. It'll strengthen a neural pathway. If it's one that we haven't used in however long, it'll degrade that one and start to like not let that be, useful to us anymore. It puts our memory in whichever category and stores it in the part of the brain. Okay, so that's what's happening in the subconscious mind. That's why we have weird dreams, is because it's doing all this metaphoric stuff. If we have a hard time letting go of control, if keeping control is really important for us, if we have a deep investment in maybe our intellect, or in like making sure we've got our eyes on everything, that I can kind of figure out everything, and that's our constant way of being productive. I need to be productive. I need to do these things. Then sleep for us feels subconsciously like I'm wasting time. I need to be more producing. I need to be thinking more. I need to be figuring things out. What we don't realize is that is when we figure stuff out. Like when our subconscious mind has the space and the time to put everything where it needs to be and check it with our collective awareness, with our mind's collective awareness, that's when, like, it's the old adage, like, why don't you sleep on it? If you sleep on it, you'll come out with a better knowledge. We inherently know that. We've known that since before brain science even existed. So we know that once that we sleep, we're going to kind of understand things better. So when someone isn't sleeping, it starts because they're trying to stay into conscious control. To let go of that control feels scary, feels dangerous for some reason, or feels unproductive. And again, we're not thinking that consciously. You're not sitting there going, I think I'd just like to stay in control, and that's why I'm going to stay up all night. And so the brain just does that, and we're breaking through. So some people have a hard time falling asleep. Some people will be woken up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep. And that's what it is. We've got these warring, they're supposed to work together. They're meant to work together. And what we've got is these opposing forces where the conscious mind needs to stay awake, aware, and in control so that it can be productive. And a lot of times it comes because productivity is worth. I'm only worthy if I'm producing. I'm only worthy, like people will only accept me and like me if I'm, doing what I need to be doing. And this is my value, and and they also are thinking a lot. There's also a lot of thinking happening.
Yeah, a lot of times it's so, like this one, insomnia in particular, is very clearly just like your mind and when you're thinking. Because a lot of times it's like you can't stop thinking. You can't just shut your brain off.
Yeah. And but people will say, I just have all these things that pop up, and, this pops up and that pops up. And it's just because there's also sometimes a lack mentality, like, but there's not enough time and there's not enough. And if I don't do this now, and it's a little bit of frantic kind of energy, and to sleep feels useless. It feels like it's not worthy of, like, I'm gonna miss something. Mm-hmm. And it's totally the opposite. And then I will say what usually happens after that is someone has an experience with insomnia where they start to link things together. So they do the insomnia in their bedroom or whatever, and they'll plan for it. They start to plan for it. Oh, what am I gonna do if I don't sleep tonight? Mm-hmm. So already your brain's like, okay, so what? So we're not sleeping tonight? Are we not sleeping tonight? Or we're planning to not sleep tonight. Okay. It just listens. And so you do these things. And then I've even had people who've made lists of the things that they're going to do that night while they're not sleeping.
Wow.
Because they know that they're not going to sleep.
Yeah.
So,
and it's the confirmation and everything. Obviously, not able to get into everything in this one episode, but if you listen to the first episode we did, it talks about like the confirmation, all the evidence that this is true, this is going to happen.
Yes. And a lot of times it's a story. My guess is someone in the family didn't sleep well, or they were told as a baby they were a bad sleeper.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly Hannah's story.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's
Hannah,
right.
My sister, has a whole video with you on the topic of insomnia. And my mom had the story growing up. Oh, Ellen always slept, because we were only 5 months apart. Ellen always slept so good, but Hannah, she would always wake Ellen up, and I had to go put her in the separate area all by herself, alone.
And that became a thing. Like when you're compared as a sibling, holy moly, does that do a number on us.
Yeah.
And that belief system of, well, I am not a good sleeper. I've never been a good sleeper. And that becomes a way to do insomnia really well.
Okay, so for people listening who are like, okay, I know what my, thing or things are, or at least I have a understanding of like, okay, I need to work on myself and my mind. I read your book, maybe like took your course or something. And they're like, well, how do I just handle day-to-day things that come up? Or if a symptom comes up, like what are some useful practical tools people can do when something comes up in their day that they would like to change either in their mind or their physical symptoms to help them throughout their day to optimize their life?
Yes, great question. What I have seen people do is get a little bit stuck in this, and it becomes like a psychoanalyzation. So now everything they think of, what am I doing? What is this? What could this be in childhood?
Yeah.
And they start to, let me tell you, that's all conscious mind thought. And that's not where we have any real work to be done. It's really our subconscious mind. It's the way that we've stored experiences. And the way that those get represented, so this comes from NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, this idea around the way that we store information. So we store it in either kinesthetically, and let me tell you, if an experience happens, you are using all of your senses to store that information. But each individual human does it maybe more primarily in one of these 6 ways.
Kind of like if you're an auditory learner or a visual learner.
Right. And that doesn't mean you just are.
Yeah.
That you don't learn any other way. It's just your primary way, your brain's favorite way of doing it.
Yeah.
So we utilize that too when we're working with people. So I will ask people, like, if you've got an issue, and the first and best question is, well, how do I know this is happening? Now with the how do I know, we don't want to be like judgy with ourselves or anything. It's like, okay, is it a feeling in my body? Is it a memory in the fact that, feeling is memory, but we think memories generally are visual constructs. But feelings are memories too. Sounds are memories. All of these different things. But we need to find out how I'm doing it. So if I have something, let's say I'm in a conversation with someone and I feel that triggered feeling, and I realize something comes up in me. So what I will do at that moment is I will go, okay, I feel that. I'll acknowledge it in myself, right? Oh, I feel that. I hear you. I notice. And that helps my body so much. Even if I just cognitively, I'm like, okay, I hear you. I'm getting the message. Something's up here. There's information here. And that's the way I look at it. Oh, information just happened. Ellen didn't do anything to, even if you did, even if you were like a emotionally immature, you don't have awareness and you said a really jerky thing.
Yeah.
Still, the way I perceive that is mine, right? If universally we could say, that was kind of a jerky thing to say, I could say in my mind, Ellen is a jerk. Or I can go, how interesting. Ellen said a jerky thing. Or at least that's the way I perceived it. I wonder what's going on with Ellen. If I just know that it's not me, or what if it maybe is me? I want to check that first. So I'll go, okay, wait a minute. Or maybe I won't do that like that. I'll be like, I will sort of become internal for a second. Like, oh, I'm aware that something is happening inside of me. And I'm going to regulate me. So what I feel like that any of that, let's say it's a physical, I'm going to use the word dysregulation. So how do I know there's a dysregulation? Either I'm put back in a situation, so some people call those flashbacks. That's a dysregulation because I'm here now. I'm not there, but all of a sudden my head's there. And sometimes my body can be there too. Dysregulation. I should be here, not there. But it's happening. So I'm not going to judge it. I'm just going to become aware of it. Or let's say I have a feeling in my body. I all of a sudden feel like that heart racy feeling, or I feel sick to my stomach, or I feel like I want to move away from you. All of these are feelings inside my body that are there for a good reason. So that's my first and foremost thing that I say. I'm feeling something, it's for a good reason. It may not be something I want to keep doing, but it's good. I have a good reason for doing it, at least the way my mind feels about it. So if I have the moment to do it then, I might not, like I might be in a conversation or talking with my boss, and now's not the time for me to check out and do all this internal work. I will shelf it in the sense that, okay, I'm aware that something happened. I am going to check in with this later when I have the space, the safety and the time and the space to do this. So I'm going to just put it over here. But I'm not avoiding, I'm not judging, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I'm acknowledging it, and I'm saying and making a commitment that I'm going to get to it later. Okay, so then when I'm home and when I'm in my space that I can do this, then I'll go and sort of unpack this. Mm-hmm. Okay, what was really happening? She said this and I felt this. How do I know? Well, I felt this feeling inside of me. And I'll sometimes ask myself the question, okay, well, when else have I felt this feeling? And when I say, when else have I felt this feeling, I'm looking for probably the proof that came way before this conversation to say, oh, I felt this before. This isn't new. Ellen just triggered something. Listen, if you can trigger something in me, that means there's something there. Mm-hmm. I always use this same example, and I know it's silly, but I say, if you were to say to me, you're a purple alien, I'd be like, no, you're a purple alien. Gosh, I can't believe you purple aliens. I'd be like, are you okay?
You're like, I'm not a purple
Everything
alien.
okay? Because, listen, I know. Like, I'm not a purple alien. It didn't happen. You cannot convince me otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I love you, but no. I would immediately go, are you okay? Are you being serious? Like, what's happening right now? Mm-hmm. I would be very confused because that doesn't resonate with me at all. Mm-hmm. Now, if you say, oh, Heather, you are so needy, I'd be like, because I'd be like, oh, that resonates. Like, I'm so afraid that you would think that about me. But that's mine. Mm-hmm. Is it true that I'm needy? I don't know. Is it? I got to check in with myself. Where is that coming from? Why does that hurt me so bad? Why did that scare me so much that you would say that about me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that reminds me of like my own personal experience of being online and what people can say. And, there's a lot of opinions, a lot of just opinions that people have about anything that you put online. And someone can say something about me that's very negative, and there are times when it doesn't affect me at all. Oh, that doesn't resonate. No, I'm not like that. They think that I'm like that, but whatever. Then there are times when someone says that you are this, or you look like this, or whatever. And if I have that feeling already inside me, that's when it's, I can't believe someone thinks that about me. I am like that. Oh, there's such a difference how certain things can affect you and others don't.
I know. Can we please stop being so mean online? But people are hurting. That's really what it is.
But most people are so nice. But yes. it's the evidence how you like prop up like a negative experience like that, like something you read, because there's a difference between constructive thought versus completely unconstructive, and okay, whatever that person's going through that day, like that's them.
Disagree with me.
Yeah.
Be curious.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your disagreement.
Yeah. That's curious. Yeah. There's such a difference there.
But if I have to like judge you because of the way, if I have to somehow take you down for you to be in question, that's something different.
Yeah.
That's me not feeling good about me.
Yeah.
And I'm now trying to make you look bad so I feel better.
And there's so many layers to like being online. People would say something online they would never say to the person in real life. Like, so
100%.
There's all that. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But that's the truth of that though is like, why do some comments really sting and others
don't
bypass?
Yeah. If let's say they're a bunch of negative comments together where it's just not constructive, but just nasty. Why are some nasty ones like, someone said that? Wow.
I know.
They must have been having a really hard day.
Yes. Where you can do that. Like, oh, shame. They must be.
Yeah.
Poor person,
Like, how can we, help so that that's not them having a super hard day versus like, then it hits you like a bullet.
That's ours.
Yeah.
The bullet's ours.
Mm-hmm.
If it can be triggered, it's in us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of therapy up until this point has been helping people manage triggers and cope with these things. And listen, I'm all for anything that helps us feel better, except that long term, it doesn't help us feel better. We actually end up feeling worse because we're still not listening. That if you trigger me, there's something there. I get really curious about this now. When I'm listening to someone and something happens inside my body, I'm like, oh, looky there. Oh, looky there. Something to heal, something to get into, some information for me to dive deeper in. And now I think I'm an amazing adventure. I don't think I'm a hot mess. Like, I don't think I'm broken. I don't think I'm the ways that I used to really define myself. I don't believe it anymore. So now a trigger to me can be like, oh, information. I'm so curious about myself. Like, where did this come from? What's happening with me? So that's really my first step in figuring that out, is saying, this is information. And hey, body and mind, I'm listening now. I'm listening. And it's okay. You're safe to tell me. Talk to me. Talk to me. Right? Like, let's do this. And that just creates this space, I feel like, for there to be now some internal conversation that can be useful. So then I'll recognize, okay, how do I know this thing bothered me? And oftentimes, let's say you said I was needy and that's what I was going for. And I was like, it makes me feel sad. Then I'm going to go in my space and go, okay, what was the real problem with that? That Ellen thinks I'm needy. Why does that bother me so much? Because I love Ellen and I don't want her to think I'm needy, because if she thinks I'm needy, she's not going to want to really be with me. Okay, interesting. Doesn't mean that's true. It just is I'm going to put all my belief systems out there. I'm not going to judge them. I'm just going to observe them and put them out there. Okay, but why is that so scary to me? When else did I feel like being needy wasn't okay? And let me just tell you, vulnerability, like when I was a child, I grew up with, my mom's an addict, and she had so much trauma of her own, and the using was an effort to mitigate her own stuff. But for me to be needy as a child was so hard, because it would make her feel so bad because she couldn't meet those needs. And it made her feel so terrible about herself, she would downward spiral. So for me to have needs was not okay, not safe. I had to be so good all the time. I'm fine. I'm always fine. What do you need, actually, as a little person? And so that, to me, for you to call me needy would be like, trigger, trigger, trigger. Now, I will say, it's not that triggery for me anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of going into that thing. If you said that to me, I'd be like, interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me how you're getting there.
Yep.
Like, what is it that you're observing about me? And I would be more curious now than it being, like my heart rate wouldn't have to rise.
Right. So how did you get there from where something like that would trigger you so much? That's like a daily tool what's a daily tool and practice that can help someone get from there to where, what the other part that you're saying, where it's not as triggery.
Yes.
That aspect.
Okay. That's that being able to look back and go, okay, well, what is my history? So I have people do what we call a pain cure list. And it's past negative experiences and current realities. It's a little acronym or whatever. Wasn't trying to be cute with it. It just came out that way. And so it was really, it's an inventory to say, okay, these are the things that I think happened, And let me tell you, it was a bit devastating in the beginning for me, because I was like, ooh, really, stuff started to come out. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible stuff. But then I sort of understood, I mean, with the way memory works and everything like that, this is just my representation. This is my story. And for me, it is a story. I don't know what is actually true, but it's true to me, and that's important. So I just put it all out there. And then I started to work on some of that stuff. So for me, a huge thing was working on my relationship with my mom, but we were estranged. So it's not like I could actually just sit down and work stuff out with my mom. In fact, that doesn't usually go well, because it's so much of internal representation. So I had to look back through and go through my childhood. So let's say on a practical level, how did I know that I couldn't get my needs met? And so for me, I represent very initially visually. So I would have a visual come up. And this is going to be tougher for me because I really don't have, I'm going to have to kind of probably make something up. But let's say I would remember maybe my mom not being able to buy groceries, let's say, right? And I mean, that was a truth too, just with our circumstances when I was growing up. And feeling hungry, but feeling like I can't say anything because I know it'll make her feel bad. So then what do I do with that? So I will go back and I will see, how do I know that this bothers me? Like, I see the visual, I see her face. I see her face of like, of not being able to provide for her own children. And I had to kind of think through that. Now I'm a mom of my own. How would I feel if I couldn't put groceries on the table? Like, how would I feel? I would feel devastated. And I didn't really consider that I couldn't as a child. You can't consider that as a child. You don't have that awareness. But even as a young adult, I never really was able to think through, wait, what did that do to her? And I'm not bypassing me. I will get to me in a minute. But her face really bothered me. And I know, because I'd go back and see that look on her face, right? So what I would do is step inside of my mom and think, okay, if this were me, how would I be feeling? I would be devastated. I would want nothing more than to put food on the table for my kids. And what is that doing that I'm not able to? It makes me feel terrible about myself. And I already feel so terrible about myself. And I don't want to feel terrible about myself. And so I'm going to really make it more about like, no, it's no big deal. Like, you ate yesterday, right? Or something that would be the most ridiculous thing that a parent would say. She's in herself now. She's trying to deal with her. If she can't even figure out her, how is she going to take care of a little one? We really want that to be the case, but guys, we can only give like what we really have, Mm-hmm. And so that I started to have a shift of perspective and go, okay, that look on her face was about her. That disdain, that was not about me. That was about her. Now, as a child, I perceived it was about me. So I gave space for there to be, okay, if she didn't have to worry about that, if she could feel good about her, if she was in her most high self, what would she do? And she'd come over and she'd be like, I know, I'm hungry too. Like, I'm sorry. What if we could, if we had a spread on the table, like what would we eat and how would that be? And engage with me, like validate me and say, I'm so sorry and be there for me. Doesn't mean that would put actual food on the table, but would it long term? What if my mom started really feeling good about herself? What if she could feel like, man, listen, I'm doing the best that I can and I'm loving this kid and I am with her and I'm motivated. Tomorrow there's going to be food on the table. And she were to go out and, we think what keeps us doing is like guilt and the shame. Let me tell you, her amount of guilt and shame just caused her to try to use again because it's too much for any human to carry. Mm-hmm. And then no more food got put on the table. So it's like it really does have profound changes. I really do believe if she had that ability to see herself as worthy and good and a great mother, and she could have validated that with me and she could have just hugged me and said, sorry, it sucks we don't have food on the table. Like, let's go find food. Let's go do something together. Let's go adventure. Maybe we can do something and find food. That would have meant more to me than the look that I perceived on her face, which was that disdain for herself, which I internalized for me, mm-hmm. and got the message that I have to pretend I'm not hungry. I have to pretend I don't have this need of food, which is just silly. So I went and did that in my mind, and all of that plays out in my mind, right? And then all of a sudden, guess what happens? My body starts feeling better. Like I start to be like, oh, I did have needs. And I should have gotten them met. And she did the best she could. And if she would have had, she would have given me. It meant nothing about me. And I'm so worthy of getting my needs met. And I could love her and she could love me and we could hug and it would be amazing. And it released me. It released me from the belief that I wasn't worthy of having my needs met.
Absolutely.
So was I needy? No, I was hungry because humans need food.
Yeah.
And that was okay. And it was okay for her to know that about me too. And it motivated her then to go and do something different from a positive place, like, I am going to do this.
That's incredible. Thanks for sharing all that. That is like such an incredible story to just be able to hear like what you went through and how you've healed from. And I think it's helpful for people to know too that like when they're finding themselves in a place where, the blood is rising and they're feeling the anxiety and the stress coming, how to take a moment, take a pause, go back to what could be potentially causing that trigger. And so much of what mind change is going back to that experience, like, and feeling it. Like, you have to go to the place that you don't want to go.
Yes. and actually feel the feelings.
Feel it. Let yourself feel it. Because
And
in
expand
a lot of
it.
the things, people are just pushing it to the side. It's not there. It's not real. Just positive affirmations.
Right.
But that doesn't like take away what you felt.
Or they want to get in and feel worse about it. Like, I can't believe, like, she should have, and she was a terrible person. And then we just feel more terrible within ourselves.
Yeah. So you have to get there, and then you have to rewire the brain, which is what you do, basically.
Right. So her face was a memory. I have a neural pathway based on that look on her face. That's how I stored that information visually. So all of it was held visually in that look on her face. When the look on her face changed, it like set my, it rewired that, oh, now it's that look. Like I can't see her do that other look anymore. I can only see the look of love. Now, okay, I'm going to hear the people who are like, yeah, but, okay. So what, you're just going to pretend like it was okay that you didn't have food on the table? No, I'm not saying that. I just said, in fact, I can say more than ever, there should have been food on the table. But I understand, like, holding my mom hostage in my head, that she should have done better. She should have provided. Like, when I know that woman's history, her even just putting one foot in front of the other every day was a huge success for her. So, and it doesn't let her off the hook. It doesn't, none of that stuff. It's not what I'm looking to do. But I stay hostage if I hold her in that space.
For your whole life.
For my whole life. Then, with the way the brain works and a confirmation bias and everything, if I think that my needs are not worth being met and that people won't, if that's my belief system from childhood, my own mother didn't meet my needs. Now I'm going to find that everywhere I go. I'm going to find that in my jobs. Now my bosses don't even see how hard I work and they don't even have to do everything. I'll find it in my marriage. He never does anything. It's me. I have to take care of the kids. I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. And I'll just recreate that wound because I'm trying to heal it. That's the thing. We don't realize that we're actually trying to heal it. So we keep recreating it until it's reconciled. It doesn't get reconciled that way by continuing to recreate it. But our brain's trying and our body's telling us. And it keeps, it's triggering us to go, hey, you need to get rid of this so that, like, you got to change this. You're still holding on to this. You're not that little girl anymore, that hungry little girl anymore. You have plenty of food. You can do, like, it's okay. And mom would have given it to you had it meant nothing about you. I need to go back and set that little girl free because otherwise I will keep those belief systems, even though it was, how old am I, 46? I was like 42 years ago.
Yep.
I could still be holding on to something, a belief system that affects me now.
That's not serving you anymore.
Not serving me.
Which
Did
is
it
the
serve me then?
victim versus victimhood.
Yes, it did serve me then. Then, if I would have spoken up in the way that I would now, she wouldn't have been able to handle that at the place where she was at the time.
Yeah.
It would have just made her feel 1,000 times worse, which would have spiraled her further. So as a child, I did the best that I could. She was doing the best she could. I am not that little girl anymore. I don't want to keep doing it that way. I don't want to have to keep being needy or pretending I don't have needs, because I do. Every human does. And it shows up in neediness in other ways, which was my sickness, my illness. I can't take care of myself. Someone has to take care of me, and they can't make me feel guilty about it, because clearly I can't do it on my own. Oh, and I still felt awful about that. I was still so ashamed of that, right? But I stayed in it, and my husband, if you've heard our story, he did. He was the one. He came in and he rescued and he took care of me, and I'll do anything for you, which sounds amazing, doesn't it? But that's not the real. I could, like, it's okay, and I can be okay and still have that.
Yep.
I don't have to be sick to get that.
Yep. And I encourage anybody to go listen to or watch our first episode together with Kent and Heather McKean, so her and her husband. Especially going into this, if this is your first time hearing about this, you might be like, okay, so how do you rewire the brain? Definitely go watch the first one. We're probably not going to get much into that now because we're going to close out soon. But go watch the first one because we really explain the difference of just living in it versus like changing it, rewiring the brain.
Yes.
And so much of it, the way you explain it, is like going to the places you don't want to go, to those stories, those experiences that hurt you emotionally or physically, any of that, and then changing the story. And a lot of it is like wishing you had a Heather in your head to get there. Because so much of it is conversational. You know, like you're there and you're sitting in it, you're like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but this is what I felt. And then it's the perspective of like bringing new evidence to the table. Well, isn't it true that because of this, that this is why your mother responded this way? Maybe she was hurting because of this, and all those things that bring different evidence for you to help you understand what was really happening, or rewiring your brain for maybe something happened the way that you really felt it, but to be able to heal from that.
Yes. And I will say, and you said it before, it's not easy, but it is simple. Like the how we do it is simple, and it's all in the book. So it's not like, oh, like you need to spend a bunch of money to figure this stuff out. It's in the book. Mm-hmm. It's all there.
Yeah.
The application of it, though,
it's a lot of work.
It can be.
Yeah.
But more because we don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
It's a completely counterintuitive way.
So true. It's so true. It's like practice. It takes practice.
If you were raised this way, if you were born into a mind change community.
Oh my gosh.
And you knew how powerful you were, and you watched other people take personal responsibility, this would be like breathing air. It would be like, oh, this and this. Oh, I want a different neural pathway with that. I want a different outcome of that, so I'm going to change this. We would just do it.
And so much of it starts with, like, if you're raising children, like, okay, how do I practice this with my kids so that they're growing up, like, confident, self-responsible, you know, all that. So much of it is, like, checking in. When you're feeling a feeling, pull back, ask yourself questions, find evidence here and there, and you can change that.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Having children was the biggest challenge to that, right? Of like,
they're mirrors to you.
They are mirrors, and then I have to check in with my own regulation. Like, am I dysregulated? Because if I go dysregulated, you just watch. You're about ready to watch something, they're gonna just hit the roof in some way. Yes. If I dysregulate, because children do not possess the ability to self-soothe. So contrary to all that stuff they say, they don't actually possess the hardware to self-soothe. They co-regulate. So who do they co-regulate to? Us.
Yeah, they see what we're doing, and then they do it.
And they feel what we're feeling. See, they're live wires. They haven't learned all these ways to disconnect from gut yet.
And their brain is still developing.
Yep. And so they are very they're still very nonverbal in the sense that they can read our body language, which as adults we kind of forget about. But children are so the looks on our faces, the way we breathe, they pick up on all of that. And so if we're not truly regulated, they know, and they dysregulate. So it's such a huge responsibility. It is.
I go to bed thinking about that all the time.
But it's also a huge healing opportunity.
Yeah.
Because what if we teach them that, like, whoa, I just went out and let me take personal responsibility for coming back in.
That is like one of the
we need
most
to breathe
important.
First. Mama needs to breathe.
Mama needs a minute.
Hold on.
Give me a minute. Or need to apologize, acknowledge where you messed up. Like, all that is, like, so helpful, I think.
Assumptions. Like, when you said that, I assumed this, and I didn't even give you a chance to say, what were you really feeling? Like, if we model this, but we've got to do it to ourselves.
Yes.
It can't be fake. We can't just, a lot of people run into this, like, gentle parenting, kind of like, because we aren't parenting ourselves that way.
So true.
We can't be complete and utter jerks to ourselves, and yet be
like,
all...
No,
it doesn't work that way. We have to first reparent ourselves and then create space to do that with the others. We have to be real, congruent. They know it. They know when we're not doing it for real. And it makes us even more mad. I'm trying to be gentle. Right? Like, it just fires us up. But they they are looking for, and I love that about kids. They want us real.
I know.
They want us authentic. The truest of true. If we're sad, they want us to cry. If we're happy, they want us to joyfully laugh. If we're confused, they want us to be like, what the heck? I don't even get this. They want to see that it's all okay.
To feel their feelings.
Yes. And because that's the only way they get permission, is to watch the way that we do it.
Right.
So it's a lot with us. And this is and I see it as a privilege to be able to be like, oh my gosh, I'm this far in my journey and I'm still learning. And I say that to my kids. I think I probably said that last week to my teenage daughter. Yeah. It's like, never had an almost 16-year-old before. First time being here.
Yep.
Like, never done this before. We're doing this together.
Yep.
I need your feedback. Like, I need to know. Like, I just need to know.
How few parents are doing that. I need your feedback. Tell me what's up.
Like, I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
This is my best. If it's not good enough for you, I need you to be able to say that because I don't really know. I'm happy to adjust.
That's something I'm not reading in the parenting books.
Well, I'm like, I had to say that though, because I'm
I'm saying like that's really interesting and insightful.
I needed to say like, this is the best I've got.
Because that's how you are even with your relationships. Like you have to be able to be open to receive the feedback.
Yes. And I have to be gentle with myself too, to be like, this is all I have. Doesn't mean I can't get more though. I'm open for more. So I'm doing my best. How's that landing with you? Because if it doesn't land with you, my best isn't going to be your best. And we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I might be like, hey, I'm doing my best. So sorry, kiddo. You need to just deal with it. And now they've just been invalidated. They've not been seen. I haven't held a space for them. I can figure stuff out. I'm open. But I only have what I have. So I can get more if I'll be told. I'm still teachable, and I'm able to learn.
And that alone is such good modeling for kids.
Yeah, I would hope so.
That you're teachable.
Right?
Yes.
To stay teachable.
Yep. Okay, so as we run out this conversation, we could keep going and going. But I want to round it out a little bit and just talk about how we work together on my pregnancy course that I created with my sister, Hannah. It's called the Empowered Pregnancy and Birth, and you were such an important addition to this course. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how mind change affects your birth? Because you're in, like for anyone who doesn't know, you are in this course. There's an entire module dedicated to mind change, to have the birth that you desire, of your dreams, and that anything holding you back from what you think birth is supposed to feel like, and you don't want it to feel that way, that's what we rewire in the course.
Yes. So one of the things that I say in the course is that giving birth is a skill. And it also, it's butted up against it, and it's also an innate ability. But it is a skill, so we can alter it. So it's something we should be able to physiologically do naturally, easily. And why don't we, though? And that's because we're so adaptable. And we've adapted to this. And there's so much history on why we've adapted to this sort of pain default around pregnancy. There's a lot of stuff that happens with us in pregnancy. It's one of those, oh my gosh, healing opportunities. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, we don't want to pass things down that didn't feel good for us. Somehow we know that deep, deep, deep inside. So what is really there, we know might really get passed down. And it's this space that opens up for us to go, ooh, I want to be a little more selective about what I am passing down. So oftentimes a lot more comes up, and we perceive a lot of these things that we haven't dealt with as pain. And so what does our body do? There's pain in it. And if we really think there's stuff that we haven't dealt with, that we didn't know we still, as adults, still don't know how to deal with and process, and we're still carrying, and we're about to give birth to a child, the body's a little bit more like, wait, hold on, right? And it's this whole kind of posture, which is counterintuitive for birth. That goes up against, that's a maladaptation for what we naturally do, right? Fetal ejection response is that our body, the baby comes to a certain spot and we just like, out comes baby. Just bloop, out it pops.
Yep.
Easy. Everything opens. We are built that way. We're designed that way, but there is a story around birth that tells us otherwise.
And it holds you back. It really does.
It so holds you back. Your body listens.
I could talk about that forever.
I know.
I love birth.
I love birth too. I'm so fascinated by our bodies, and I'm so grateful that you included me in this, and that honestly, you opened this whole portal. I had never been asked about mind change with birth before you. Wow. I literally was like, well, that's a great question.
Yeah, because I was mentioning it. You're like, well, yeah, I mean, with, everything involved about the mind, yeah, you could totally do that.
Yeah, I was like, I know how pain works. I know how the body works. Well, yeah, of course, we should be able to change this.
Yeah.
And it just opened this door.
And now you've had so many clients specifically about it, and so many amazing stories.
Oh my gosh.
From it.
I could just sit here and talk about all these empowered, amazing, transformative, healing birth experiences that people had that has just, and even my own girls hear me talk about this and they're so interested. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is shaping them differently than I was. But I didn't even know I was shaped. I had no idea that I had been indoctrinated and shaped with this other narrative. it was so normal. I was unaware that it was even a thing. I didn't know about this whole other option, which is actually the more natural option. And so it's such, the fact that you opened this whole experience up to me, I'm so forever grateful for.
Oh, I'm so grateful for you.
Because I feel like it's the opportunity. Listen, I just want to help people. I just want to help people heal. Like, that's my biggest thing.
I mean, it's
just want
so
that.
rewarding.
To start with birth, to start healing mama so that baby has this different environment to come into, so that their first entrance into this world is like ecstatic.
Amazing.
Like in such love, in the body just loves and hugs, and there's not resistance. They're not meeting resistance in the first stages of their development. Like, do you know, a lot of trauma I deal with goes back to birth trauma. In a adult, we get back to some really interesting things in their birth or when they were in the womb. So this is, I just feel like it's starting at ground zero.
It's kind of where it starts.
Yes, of helping people heal. And I feel like it's probably one of the most profound things we could be doing right now.
Amazing. Well, this is a great place to stop, I think. I want to keep going.
I
But I think this is a great place. And for anyone who is interested in more of this, please check out all of her different outlets on her website, your Instagram. It's all basically Mind Change.
It's all Mind Change.
All Mind Change. So thank you so much for being here. I am so happy about how this went. This was so fruitful for me. Like, I just could talk about it forever with you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for your friendship too.
Oh,
Just
love you. Okay, let's end the conversation. Goodbye, everybody.